Welcome to Lair of the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, a review of the new Stryper album, Even the Devil Believes. Now, Stryper is one of these bands that certainly has its detractors. And if you're somebody who never liked Stryper, you never liked what they stood for, their imagery, their lyrics, their whole vibe, well, you're probably not going to like this record, and my review is probably not going to change your opinion. On the other hand, if you are a fan of Stryper and you like 80s melodic metal, high vocals, big choruses, well produced, and you like the classic Stryper sound, I think you're really going to like this record. Now, for me, I discovered Stryper in the 80s, MTV, all that, and I am a fan of big choruses, melodic stuff, well-produced things. As much as I love to get down and dirty with thrash or death metal, there's a part of me that likes really melodic, well-produced, catchy stuff. And when I heard Stryper, that's what appealed to me. They're big choruses, great singing, great harmonies, great guitar playing. That also drew me in. I always liked the sounds of the guitars in Stryper, and their albums were always very well produced. So I've been a fan. Although I'll be honest with you, I haven't really followed what Stryper has been up to since the 80s. And from what I can see, I have heard some of their stuff from their last so many records, just listening here and there, but I haven't really followed them. But it seems like they've been pretty consistently putting out records in the 2000s. So here we go. Even the Devil Believes, out on Frontier Records. Frontier Records is famous for their release a lot of new albums from bands that got their start in the 80s, a lot of these classic 80s bands. The band consists of Michael and Robert Sweet. Michael, vocals and guitar, Robert on drums, Oz Fox on guitar, and Perry Richardson on bass. I did not have any liner notes or anything for this album. I'm going off of my Amazon Music HD streaming service. So I'm assuming that, looking at the Wikipedia, Perry Richardson was listed as the most recent bass player. So that's who I'm assuming is on the record. I don't know who produced the record, but it sounds really, really good. I wouldn't say it's overly slick, but all the instruments are in place. You can hear everything. You can hear the bass. The drums sound really good. They're loud. They're right there. Sort of a classic Stryper drum sound. The classic Stryper guitar sound is here, which I've always really liked, which is that sort of mid-rangey, chunky mid-rangey rhythm sound that they have, and that unique lead sound. All right, so let's get into some highlights of some of the songs that jumped out to me on the album. So, Blood from Above, the album opens with that. It's a heavy, fast-driving riffer. Starts off with this big scream from Michael, sort of a classic Michael Sweet, Soldiers Under Command, that thing that he does up into the stratosphere. And I should say, Michael sounds great on this. The guy has not lost a step. I have seen Stryper live a couple times now, and I'll tell you what, man, they sound fantastic live. Michael sounds great. Even though their albums are usually pretty slickly produced with lots of vocal harmonies, they pull it off live. Their vocals live sound great. Oz Fox has a great voice for backing vocals. When I saw them, the first time I saw them, they had somebody playing keyboards along with the bass player also singing, and it just sounded great. Michael and Oz both play leads. When I saw them live, they were just right on the money. Really great live show. So again, Blood from Above has this great sort of triplet figure thing in the chorus. He is the unholy sacrifice. It's kind of cool. Then it goes back into the fast chugging riff. It's got a fast shredding guitar solo with like some open string stuff on it. So overall, a cool, aggressive opener. Next is Make Love Great Again. It starts off with a flanged, distorted, some sort of affected bass intro thing that kind of fades in. I should say that the bass is, you can hear the bass on this record, and it does have some pretty cool lines and interesting things here and there. It's a mid-tempo number with like a kind of a real traditional metal style riff, like a chugging thing. There's this nice synth line that comes in the second verse, and there really isn't a lot of synthesizer on this record, or keyboards or synthesizers, and here it made me think that I wish that there was a little bit more, because this synth line comes in the second verse and it adds a nice little texture and little change to everything. Do Unto Others has a nice cool like picked minor key intro pattern. Another chugging main verse riff, big catchy chorus with the classic Stryper background vocals. You know what I'm talking about. The chorus is kicked in and there's just like all these big voices that elevate the chorus up. So that's really cool. It's got an Eddie Van Halen style tapping guitar solo. The guitar leads on this record are really great. There's a lot of kind of shredding style guitar stuff, but it's also melodic. And I've always liked the Stryper lead guitar sounds. It's very sort of cutting. It has a very mid-rangey cutting sound to it. For all you guitar players out there, it really reminds me of the Tom Scholz Rockman. For those who don't know, it's like an effects pedal sort of from the 80s that gave this very sort of cutting mid-range sound that Tom Scholz from Boston invented this pedal, if you will. So this Stryper always reminds me of that, and it has this on this record. How to Fly, this song reminded me of sort of a slower mid-tempo one. Reminded me a lot of Enough's Enough. Enough's Enough was a melodic 80s, mid-late 80s band that came around during sort of the hair metal era, although I really wouldn't. They were a little bit more, Enough's Enough had sort of like a melodic Cheap Trick Beatlesque vibe to them, and this song really reminds me of them for some reason. The chorus of the song has this major key sort of descending bass line thing. It's got these very 80s sounding, that chorus is very 80s sounding to me. It's has these kind of Beatle, King's X-like harmonies, especially in the bridge section of the song. There's just these really nice harmonies that come in. Something I've always really liked about Stryper is their harmonies, and like I said, when I've seen them live, they deliver the vocals live. Next is Divider, which has a very aggressive vocal delivery from Michael. And if I haven't said already, Michael sounds great on this record. He sounds like he hasn't lost a step at all, can still hit all the notes. And overall on this record, he kind of sings in an aggressive, I would say angry style. And like I mentioned earlier, I haven't really followed what Stryper has done in the last so many years. So I don't know if this is something that he's doing on all these records, but having my only real reference being the 80s Stryper stuff, hearing him sing on this, it jumped out to me that he's singing in a more aggressive sort of angry vocal delivery, and it pretty much works. It does work on this song. There's these sort of gang vocals in this that add to the aggressive vibe of it. It's got this heavy, again, it's this distorted, like sounds like there's a wah-wah pedal, some kind of effect on the bass that hits this big low note in the chorus, which gives it all this sort of heft. Drops down after the second chorus into sort of this briefly sort of spacey part with some vocal effects, and the guitar sounds like it's coming through a radio or something. And then there's another big classic Michael Sweet scream that only he can do. It sounds great. This I Pray is an interesting one. Starts off with acoustic guitar, very bluesy, goes into like a country-ish kind of vibe. When the chorus kicks in, it's like a ballad, sort of a mid-tempo, slow ballad type of thing. When the chorus kicks in, the distorted guitars kick in, and the chorus gets really big. And for some reason, when I listen to it, I can't help but picture, if this was the 80s, this would have been, they would have had a video for this song of them like in a Western setting with cowboy hats on and the acoustic guitar and everything. So So a fun song, melodic song. I kind of wish in some ways there was a little bit more of this diversity, like the acoustic guitars in this. I wish they had varied up a little bit more of the songs, maybe with some more, like I mentioned earlier, keyboard synth things or some acoustic guitars. Invitation Only is real 80s melodic sounding. Maybe a bit too much for me, but its sketchiness you cannot deny. After I heard the song, it was stuck in my head. So maybe a little too 80s and melodic. For some reason, the verse really reminded me of the verse in Dawkins' Just Got Lucky. Shoulda known better. It has like that same kind of thing in the guitar and the way the melody line moved. There's this very 80s synth sounding thing that comes in the chorus. So maybe not my favorite song on the record, but a cool song nonetheless. And I'm not covering every song on the album here. I'm just sort of touching on various ones. For God and Rock and Roll, a very classic Stryper sounding song. It's got this Stryper thing where they hit the chord and the drums are playing underneath it, kind of like Hell with the Devil and Michael singing over the top of that. The chorus, the lyrics in the chorus, maybe a little too standard for me. The rock and roll, never let the devil take your soul. I don't know, just a little too 80s sounding for me or something. I don't know. And the last song on the album is my favorite song is my favorite song on the record. Middle Finger Messiah, a great song title. It's a fast number, very fast, like a Judas Priest style burner. Reminds me a little bit of like Painkiller. It's got like a main sort of guitar riff like that. The chorus of it has this sort of like middle finger Messiah, kind of fist pumping, aggressive thing. More big Michael screams in it. I kind of wish more of the album had a little bit of this more aggressive. Really, the only other song that had this vibe to it was the first song, Blood from Above. And it's got this really nice guitar solo in it, very fluid, really great sound, almost jazzy, fusion-y type guitar solo. And underneath it, the rhythm guitars and the bass are playing like this syncopated rhythm underneath it, which is really cool. Great tone. The leads on this album, I love the lead tone. I talked about that already. The soloing in general is really melodic, but still has a lot of cool chopsy stuff to it. Very 80s throwback style. So I like the album. There are some things that I found. I wish that there was a little more diversity in the songs. I sort of hinted at this earlier. It gets a little bit too much verse, chorus. And I think the album could have done with maybe a more slower, maybe moody ballad type of thing. Something to sort of break up the feel, because at times it just feels a little bit too much the same. I would have liked to have maybe heard some more synth textures or just some more different things to break away from that sort of verse, chorus, big voices in the chorus type of formula. Although I really like the mix and you can hear everything, classic Stryper guitar sound, the bass, you can hear the bass, the drums, the very Stryper drum sound, hear all the background vocals. It sounded like the guitar in the left channel. I don't know if it was louder than the guitar in the right channel or if it just was the sound of that guitar on the left channel that jumped out more. It made it feel like when I was listening to it, like the mix was a little lopsided. And there was even a point where I was like, there is a guitar in this right channel, right? Like I sort of took the other headphone off just to make sure, because it just felt a little imbalanced towards me. I wish that sound of the guitar on the left channel was the same as or at the same level, or just balanced out a little bit more with the right channel guitar. So there you go. If it's classic Stryper, really. It sounds like classic Stryper. Maybe a little more aggressive than what you would hear from them in the 80s. I mentioned earlier I might have liked the ballad, but I think I could have done without the 80s style ballads. They could have done something that was maybe more like a bluesy, moody type of ballad thing. But if you like classic Stryper like I do, I think you'll really enjoy this record. And Stryper is a band that I got to give them credit. You know, they have their sound. They've carved out a niche for them. You may not like what their lyrics and their image and all that other stuff may be too much for you, but they've got their thing. They're doing it. They've been doing it for a very long time now. I remember in the 80s, everybody, oh, this is a gimmick. You know, this whole thing is just a gimmick. And, you know, for me, if this was a gimmick, they would have abandoned this a long time ago. Because at this point, what are they? They're not trying to win over an entirely new fan base. They realize who they are. They realize what their strengths are. They realize what the people who like their music like. The big choruses, Michael's high-pitched vocals, the guitar sounds, the melodicism, the well-produced things, the classic 80s type sounding stuff. And they deliver it on this record. So, and I will say though that when I saw them live, the first time I saw them live was in a medium-sized club, and I tell you, in the crowd, I was shocked at. First of all, it was packed, and everybody was getting into it, and the crowd was a real mixture of age groups. There were young kids there, teenagers, and the majority of the crowd was people my age that grew up with them in the 80s. And I'll never forget, there was a kid, I'm assuming on his dad's shoulders, for the whole show, and this kid knew every word. He was right there with the new stuff, with the old stuff. So they have a loyal fan base. They're giving the fan base, I think what they want. So for me, it's okay. It's cool. It was a fun listen. If you like Stryper, I think you're going to like this. If you don't like Stryper, I don't know, give it a listen. There are some really cool riffs on here. There's some really great playing on here. There's some great lead work. There's some great, real classic sounding 80s style riffing on this. So, okay, so there you go. Stryper, Even the Devil Believes, Frontier Records. It just came out today. So look for it out there. Check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've heard this record, what your thoughts are. If you're a Stryper fan, make sure you hit subscribe and like. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.